Okay, let's continue with process costing. Next topic in process costing is work in progress. So in previous part we saw that some units were completed and some units were scrapped, but all of them were output. But sometimes in production process what happens is units are not completed, so there is still some work remaining, so work is in progress. So work in progress are those units that are not fully complete, those units on which work is still remaining. And then we have physical units. Physical units are actual number of units. To explain this, let's say we have bottles. There are 8 bottles, so physical bottles are 8. And then equivalent units are units equal to fully complete units. Like the example of bottles, let's say these 8 bottles, the physical bottles, they contain half water, so they are half empty or half full. So if they are half full, that means they have water of about 4 bottles, so they are equivalent to 4 bottles. So sometimes what happens is in a company, work is started on units, and because they are not completed, we will not call it complete units. But obviously, because of some work that has been done, we don't want to ignore it as well. So we want to know if we combine the work that has been done on these units according to the percentage work that has been done, that equals to how much of completed units. That's called equivalent units. So let's continue with the question here. We have, let me remove this. Okay, requirement is what are equivalent units for closing work in progress at the end of the month. A manufacturing company, a company manufactures chemical X. In a single process, at the start of the month, there was no work in progress. During the month, 300 liters of raw material were input into the process at a total cost of 6,000. Conversion cost during the month amounted to 4,500. At the end of the month, 250 liters of chemical X were transferred to finished goods inventory. The remaining work in progress was 100% complete with respect to materials, 50% complete with respect to conversion costs. There were no losses in the process, and there's no scrap value available during the month when losses occur. Okay, so just like previous questions, we have material, 300 liters at a total cost of 6,000, and then we have spent extra 4,500 on conversion. Now we have 250 units that were transferred to the finished goods. So 250 is output or finished goods. And then if 250 were output, that means we have work in progress of 50 units. They didn't say anything about normal loss. So in work in progress question, I would not expect normal loss to exist. So we have 50 work in progress, and this is closing work in progress because it is at the end of the process. Now, they said that the work in progress, the 50 units, the output is obviously complete, that's why they are output. I will also write finished goods or FG, whatever you want to call it. But I call it output because sometimes a product is not finished good because it can go through multiple processes. In this particular process, it is output or it is finished goods. Now, the work in progress, they said, is 100% complete with respect to material, 50% complete with respect to conversion cost. Now, what it means is that in respect of material, everything has been purchased. Sometimes what happens is all the material that you need for a job, you purchase that, and what is remaining is doing work on it. So in this particular situation, the material is purchased for the work in progress. The only thing that is remaining is 50% conversion cost, which is labor and overheads. Okay, so to answer this question, we do 3 steps. The first step is we prepare something called statement of equivalent unit. One thing is physical units. The physical units, obviously, the finished goods are 250 and closing work in progress is 50, so total 300. So no problem here. Physical is physical. It doesn't care about the percentages. So even in our example of the bottles, even if the water contained in the bottles is, let's say, 10%, it is still physically one bottle. So the difference is equivalent unit. Now these finished goods, 250, for material, they are 100% complete. That's why they are output. So equivalent unit are 250, same as physical. And for conversion as well, equivalent unit is 250. Closing work in progress, it is said that it is 100% complete with respective material. That means it is 50, but it is 50% complete with respect to conversion. It means it is equivalent to 25 units. Even though physically the closing work in progress is 50 units, but because the work done in respect of conversion cost is only 50%, so they equal to 25 completed units. For example, you want to give someone wages for the work they have done, and you agree that you will give them $10, and for a particular week, let's say he's working on 50 units, and none of the units are completed. Obviously, at the end of the week, he wants salary. So if you wanted to give him salary, you could give him salary equivalent to 25 units. So we have physically 30 units, 30 equivalent units for material, and 275 equivalent units for conversion. Now we take the cost and divide it by equivalent units. We have 6,000 material cost, equivalent units are 300, so we have 20 cost per equivalent unit. We have 4,500 conversion cost, 275 units, and we have 16.36 cost per equivalent unit. Next step, third step, is valuation. Finished goods, we have 250 units multiplied by 20 per unit becomes 5,000 for material, and 16.36 becomes 4,090 for conversion. So adding it together, 4,090, we have total cost of 9,090. So that means 9,090 is the cost of finished goods and if you take 10,500 and minus, let me open calculator, 10,500 minus 9,090 becomes 4,010. That means the value of the closing work in progress will be 1410. Let's see whether it's actually true or not. So once you have found finished goods, you can find the value of closing work in progress. If you find the closing work in progress, you can find the value of finished goods. But to be sure that your answer is correct, calculate both of them. Now let's look at closing work in progress. For material, they were 50 units, but for conversion, they were only 25 equivalent units. And when we add it together, let's round it off. We have 1000 plus, I will take that as 410. Let's make this 10. So the value becomes 1410, same as above. And when we add it together, it becomes 10,500. Okay, let's continue. We have another question here. There is opening work in progress as well. Suppose that Columbine Co. is manufacturer of processed goods, and the results in process 2 for April 2013 were as follows. Opening inventory, material input from process 2, and then cost of input material added from process 1, added materials, and then conversion cost. So we are calculating process 2. So this is from process 1 coming into process 2. And this is the cost incurred. This is the cost that was incurred in process 1, and then this is the cost incurred here. And then they go into process 3. Closing work in progress amount to 800, completed as to 100% for material, 50% for 100% for material 1 from process 1, because that cost was incurred in process 1, 50% for added material, which is material 2, and 30% for conversion cost. Now, if input is 4,000 units and 800 is complete, that means 800 is closing work in progress, that means 3,200 is output. So we have 3,200 output and 800 closing work in progress. Okay, to find the value, we will do the same 3 steps. Physical units, no problem. 3,200 and 800. Problem is with output, equivalent units. So equivalent units for M1, M2, which is material in process 2, and then conversion equivalent units. Okay, finished goods, they were 3,200 units. They are 100% complete. Why? Because they are finished goods. So no problem here. So they are the same as physical units. But closing work in progress, they said it is 100% complete, 50% complete, and 30% complete. So 100% complete, 800 units, 50% complete, 400 units, and 30% complete. Now adding it together, we have 4,000, 3,600, and 3,440. Now we find the cost per equivalent unit, which is 6,000 divided by cost per number of equivalent units. 1,080 divided by equivalent units. 1,720 divided by equivalent unit. Now valuation, third step. 3,200 multiplied by 1.50, 0.30, and 960. So adding all of 3 together, we have 7360. So 8,000 minus 7360 becomes 640, 8,800. Let's add 800. That means 1440 would be the value of closing work in progress. You can find these values directly as well, because we are multiplying 3,200 same units by 3 different costs. So if I take 1.50 plus 0.30 plus 0.50 and multiply it, it should give me same value. Now let's look at closing work in progress. 800 units equivalent, 400 units equivalent, and 240 units equivalent. 1200, 120, and 120 collectively 1440, which means our answer was correct. So once you find closing work in progress, you can find the value of output. If you find the value of output, you can find the value of closing work in progress. Okay, let's continue. Okay, next thing is opening work in progress. Now this is what makes question very difficult. So far we saw that there was no opening work in progress, which means the work remaining from last period. Closing work in progress is work remaining this year. So it is like closing inventory or opening inventory of units not completed. So there are two methods, Fifo method and Avco method. First, we will look at Avco method. This question is specifically made for Fifo method, but first we will look at how it is done using Avco, and then we will look at how it is done using Fifo. So requirement is prepare process 3 account for January 2014 using Fifo, but first we will look at Avco. The following information relates to process 3 of a three-stage production process. So we are focusing on process 3 for the month of January 2014. So with opening inventory, 300 units completed as to material from process 2, 100%. I've written here, in Avco method, opening percentage is not important. Opening percentage is given here. Even if it is given in Avco method, it is not important. You don't have to use it. But because this question is specifically relating to Fifo, so in Fifo method we will use. So in Avco method, now we are answering Avco, so we will ignore this. Material from process 2 is 4,400. Added material 1150. Labor 540. Production overheads 810. So total 6,900. In January 2014, a further 1,800 units were transferred from process 2 at a valuation of 27,000. So this is input. Added materials amount to 6,600 and direct labor to 3,270. Production overheads is absorbed at the rate of 150% of direct labor cost. Closing inventory at 31st January 2014 amount to 450. Process 2 and closing completion was process 2 100%, added material 60%, and labor 50%. So what I've done is I've taken labor cost multiplied by 150% so that it gives us overheads. So now in input we have 300 units and these costs. And then we have added extra with 1, 2, 3, and 4 of these costs. So we have process 1, process 2, and then process 3. We are calculating value here of the opening work in progress and input. So we do the same 3 steps like we previously did. So Avco method assumes that whenever we start working, a period finishes. Maybe it is a day, maybe it is a week. When 1 week finishes and when we start working next week, we start working on all units at the same time. We start working on new units as well. We start working on old units that were not completed. The closing work in progress from last year, which is opening work in progress this period. We work on all of them together at the same time. Fifo method assumes something else. I will talk about that when I answer it using Fifo method. So in Avco method, we say we work on all units at the same time. So equivalent units, we do the same way. So we have total 2,100 units. Finished goods is 1,650. Closing work in progress 450. So finished goods is finished, so that's why 100% complete. Closing work in progress was told as 100%, 60%, 50%. So 100%, 60% for material 2, and 50% for labor and overheads, which means conversion costs. Now equivalent units total is 2100, 1920, 1875, and 1875. Now because we have two costs, the opening cost and the new cost, we add it together because Avco assumes we work on the units together, so costs should also be added together. So we add together the cost, the opening cost, and the new cost, and divided by equivalent units, which in this case becomes 14.95 opening, and the new divided by equivalent units becomes 4.05, and 540 plus 3270 becomes 2.03, and 810 plus 4905 becomes 3.05. Next is valuation. Finished goods is 650, 1650 for all units. So I'm going to just multiply. We can use that shortcut as well, where we take 1650 and multiply by these values combined. So let's see. So there will be a small difference because of rounding off. So what I've done is rounded off so that it becomes exact value. We have 24,671, and then 6,660, 3353, and 5,030. So the value that I found here is what I've done is I've multiplied it directly by this value. So instead of taking this value, if you directly multiply it, it will give you this value. So the reason that it gives me exact value, I've directly multiplied and found the value. So I haven't taken the value from here. I've directly multiplied by this value so that the answer is exact. We have 39,714, the value of finished goods. And closing work in progress, they were 1650 units. Output, and we have 450 as closing work in progress. So if we have 48,675 minus 39,714, that means 8961 would be the value of closing work in progress. Okay, now let's look at closing work in progress to prove it. We have 450 multiplied by 14.95, which gives us 6727. And then this one gives us 1,090, 456, and then 868. So what I've also done here is directly multiplied by this value so that it gives me exact answer. It gives us 8961. Because this question was made for Fifo method, that's why you have these points here. So when we answer it now in Fifo method, you will see that it will give us exact answer. So remember, in Avco method, we ignore the opening percentage. We only look at the closing percentage. That is important. And we combine the costs. We combine the opening cost and the new cost. Now let's look at the same thing using Fifo method. Now, Fifo method assumes that we work on the opening units first. First, we will complete the units that were remaining last period, and then we will work on new units. So first in, first out. Same question. Now, the units that are completed, the 1650 units that were completed, they are divided in two parts now. One is the units that were remaining. If we assume Fifo concept, then these units will be completed first, and then new units will be started. So in this 1650 units, 300 units are the opening that we completed, and 1350 is the new one. So the closing work in progress is the same, no problem here. Now in opening work in progress units, we will only do the work that is remaining. So if 100% of the work was done last period, what we did this year? Nothing. If 90% work was done last period, what we did this period? 10%. If 80% was remaining last period, we did 20% this period. If 80% was done last period, we did 20% this period. So with opening work in progress, we take the remaining percentage because we did what was remaining this period. So it becomes nothing, 30, 60, and 60. And then new units are okay. We started and finished, so we did 100% of it. So remember, this is the only work that is done this period. So they are equivalent units this period. And then closing work in progress is the same as Avco method. Now in next step, when we are calculating the cost per equivalent unit, we put these costs to the side. Why? Because we took that work to the side that related to the opening work in progress. And this period, if we are talking about the equivalent unit this period, we are only talking about the cost that is incurred this period. So for now, we put this to the side. So when we are calculating cost per equivalent unit, we only take the new cost divided by total equivalent units, which becomes 15, 4, 2, and 3. See, they are exact because this question was actually for Fifo method. Now when we are doing valuation, this is kind of my diagram to show the finished goods. Some of it is opening work in progress, which were half completed last period, half completed this period, and then the remaining new. Okay, next, when we are doing valuation, 1350 equivalent units, remember, total, multiply by 15, 20,000 and 250. Now with this 20,000 and 250, we add the 4,400 cost, the opening. Why? Because those units went to the finished goods. So the cost of them will also go to the finished goods. So when we add it together, we have 24,650. We do the same, 1380 multiplied by 4, 5520, and then we add the opening cost with it. So we have kept it separate, and then at the end we have added it to the finished goods. Labor and overheads. Adding it together, all costs become 39,750. 720. This is the 1650 output. So the remaining should be $89.55. 450 closing work in progress. Let's see. Now for the closing work in progress, we only take the new cost because they are units that started this period. So it doesn't have anything to do with the opening work in progress. So only the cost incur this period is added. So adding it together, we have 89.55. So now let's look at kit questions. Okay, so we had questions remaining that were relating to work in progress. Let's look at them now. So we have a question that relates to two questions, 8.20 and then 8.30. A company manufactures chemical X in a single process. At the start of the month, there was no work in progress. During the month, 300 liters of raw material were input into the process at a total cost of 6,000. Conversion cost during the month amounted to 4,500. At the end of the month, 250 liters of chemical X were transferred to finished goods inventory. The remaining work in progress was 100% complete with respect to material, 50% complete with respect to conversion cost. There were no losses in the process, and there is no scrap value available during the month when losses occur. So now we will answer specifically what the question requires, which is what are the equivalent units for closing work in progress. If there had been a normal process loss of 10% of the input during the month, what would be the value of what would the value of loss have been? Is there any scrap value of loss? If there is no scrap value, then value would be nil if there were normal loss. Because we take normal loss, multiply by scrap value. If there is no scrap value, then value would be nil. Okay, so now let's focus on this one. What is equivalent units for material? We have 300 units input, 250 are complete. So 250 is there. And then 50 that is remaining is 100% complete with respect to material and 50% complete with conversion. So for material, it is 100% complete. So equivalent unit is 50, the same 50 unit that is remaining. Conversion cost, because it is 50% complete, 50 multiplied by 50% will give you 25 liters. So the answer would be 50 liters and 25 liters. Because closing work in progress, 50 units, 100% complete with material would mean 50 liters, 50% complete would mean 25 liters. These are the questions that we answered. Okay, next. What is the full cost, production cost of completed units during November? What is the value of closing work in progress on 30th November? A company produces a certain food item in manufacturing process. On 1st November, there was no opening inventory of work in progress. During November, 500 units of material were input into the process with a cost of 9,000. Direct labor costs in November were 38.40. Production overheads is absorbed by the rate of 200% of direct labor cost. Closing inventory on 30th November consisted of 100 units, which were 100% complete as to material, 80% complete as to labor and overheads. There was no loss in process. So in this next page, I have prepared that format to save time, where 500 units as 9,000 and 3,840, and overheads is 200% of the labor, which is 3840 multiplied by 200% becomes about 7680. So this is input. Now we do what we always do, prepare statement of equivalent units. Finished goods, 100 units are complete, so 400 would be finished. So finished or finished, so directly multiply by 100%. Closing work in progress is 100%, 80% for labor and overheads. So equivalent units 500, 480, and 480. So take total cost divided by equivalent units. Cost divided by equivalent units. Cost divided by equivalent units. And then valuation, 400 multiplied by 18, 400 multiplied by 8, 400 multiplied by 16. All of them together, we have 16,800, or you could just add them together, multiply by 1. Remember, it doesn't always work, especially if you have opening work in progress using Fifo method. In this type of question, when you don't have opening work in progress, you can find it like this, or if you're using average method. So 16,800 is the value for 400 units output. So that means remaining would be the value of finished goods. Which is, let's see, we have 100 multiplied by 18, multiplied by 8, multiplied by 16. $37.20. And let's see whether it is same. So you could find one thing. By finding one thing, you can find two things. But if you want to be confident that your calculation is correct, find both of them. So yeah, there are other questions as well. But I believe, okay, I will only answer those short questions which ask specific requirement. We have these lengthy questions as well. I believe this much is enough. But let's look at these questions where they have specific requirements. A company uses process costing to establish the costs per unit of output. We have the information available. 10,000 units, output is 9850. Opening is 100% for material, 70% for conversion. 450 units, 100% for material, 30% for conversion. We are using weighted average method. If we are using weighted average method, remember, we don't need the percentage of opening work in progress. They specifically ask what is equivalent unit for conversion cost. Output is 9850, so that would be 100% complete. Closing work in progress is 450. So if I take 450 multiply by conversion cost 30%, that becomes 135. So 9850 plus 135, 9985. So whatever is specifically asked in that question, answer that specifically. You don't have to prepare the whole format. So this is it for process costing part 2. We have part 3 remaining, which is byproducts and main products.